My husband sold my dream cabin for $70,000, and 3 days later, the FBI showed up at dinner. Stay with me till the end, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and marriage. The cabin had been my peace, my heart. It wasn't just wood and nails, it was my grandmother's legacy. I'd spent 5 long years restoring it, sanding every beam, painting every wall, keeping her memory alive in every corner. Whenever life in the city got too heavy, that cabin in the North Carolina mountains was where I went to breathe. Marlon knew what it meant to me. He always said he loved how hard I worked on it. He'd come up on weekends, pretending to help but mostly sitting on the porch, watching me work. When he suggested putting the property under both our names for tax reasons, I didn't even think twice. I trusted him, my husband, the man I believed was building a future with me. That Friday started like any other. I had just finished my shift at the hospital when I stopped by the bank to handle some paperwork. The woman at the counter smiled and said, "Oh, it's nice to see one of the sellers from the Colston cabin sale." I froze. "Excuse me?" I asked, thinking she'd made a mistake. But she turned the monitor slightly, and there it was, my cabin, marked as sold for $70,000. My heart started pounding. I called Marlon right away, but he didn't answer. I drove home, hands shaking on the wheel. He was sitting at the dining table when I walked in, calm as ever, scrolling on his phone. I asked him straight out, "Marlon, did you sell my cabin?" He looked up slowly, like he was surprised I knew. He smiled that fake calm smile and said, "Our cabin, babe." And yeah, I had to. It was just a business move. We needed the money for a loan payoff. I could barely breathe. $70,000 for a cabin worth 4 times that? My voice cracked when I said, "You had no right." But he brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal. We sat down for dinner that night in silence. I didn't eat much, couldn't even look at him. The air in the room felt thick with something I couldn't name. And then, just as I started to speak again, there was a knock at the door. 2 men in dark suits stood there, badges flashing. "Mrs. Devereaux?" one of them asked. "We're looking for your husband." Marlon came from the kitchen holding a grocery bag, and when he saw them, his whole face changed. He froze mid-step. The agent stepped forward and said, "Marlon Devereaux, you're under arrest for fraud and money laundering." I just sat there, my fork still in my hand, staring as they cuffed him right in front of me. My dream cabin was gone, my marriage shattered, and the man I loved turned out to be a stranger. I couldn't stop staring at the sale document on my phone screen. $70,000. That's all my grandmother's cabin had meant to whoever bought it. But something about it didn't add up. The buyer's name looked fake, L. Carter Holdings. No address, no number that actually worked. Every call I made went straight to a disconnected tone. When I confronted Marlon again, he didn't even look nervous. He just sighed like I was being dramatic. "Zaria, it was for a quick loan payoff," he said, pacing the kitchen. "You know I've been trying to fix that business debt. I had to move fast." I asked, "Who did you sell it to? Where's the rest of the paperwork?" He avoided my eyes. "Don't worry about that. It's handled." The way he said it made my stomach twist. Marlon had always been confident, but this time it felt different, sharp, defensive. I didn't believe a word. So I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I called my cousin, Kiona. Kiona worked as a real estate clerk downtown. She'd always been the smart one in the family, the type who noticed details others missed. When I told her everything, she didn't judge me. She just said, "Bring me the file, cuz. Let's see what he's hiding." That night, I drove to her apartment. We sat at her dining table, the glow of her laptop lighting both our faces as she searched through the property records. It didn't take long before her expression changed. "Zaria," she said quietly, "this transfer don't look right." She zoomed in on the document. My signature was there, or something that looked like it, but the curves were off, the slant too sharp. It looked copied, not written. "Girl, this is forged," Kiona whispered. "He didn't just sell your cabin. He sold something that wasn't his to begin with." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I felt sick, betrayed, used. Everything I'd worked for, my grandmother's memory, the weekends spent painting and fixing and dreaming, gone with one fake signature. Kiona reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You need to be careful, Z. A man who'll do this once might do worse." When I got home that night, Marlon was waiting in the living room. His jaw was tight, his voice colder than usual. "You've been snooping, haven't you?" he said. I froze. "I just want answers, Marlon." He stepped closer. You don't need to go digging around. That's how people get hurt. The look in his eyes made me step back. I went straight to our bedroom, locked the door, and cried quietly into my pillow. The next morning, as I gathered laundry, something heavy thudded inside one of his jeans pockets. I reached in and pulled out a small black phone. No contacts, no photos, no messages, just one number in recent calls. A burner phone. That's when I realized this wasn't just a bad sale. It was something darker, and I wasn't sure how deep it went. The next evening, I was still shaken from what I'd found. The fake signature, the burner phone, the lies that wouldn't stop circling in my head. I hadn't spoken to Marlon since the night before. He'd gone out early that morning, saying he had business to handle, and I didn't bother asking what kind. I just sat at the dinner table, staring at the cold food in front of me, wondering how I'd become a stranger in my own house. Then came the knock. Firm, controlled, not the kind you get from a neighbor. I opened the door slowly, and two men stood there, both in dark suits. They flashed their badges. "Mrs. Devereaux?" one asked politely. "I'm Agent Lewis, and this is Agent Ramirez. We need to ask you a few questions. Is your husband home?" My stomach tightened. "He's not here right now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is everything okay?" They exchanged a look, that silent kind of conversation that said everything without words. "It's just routine," one of them replied, though his tone didn't sound casual. "Do you mind if we come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. They sat at the table, the same one I'd shared dinners with Marlon at for years. Agent Lewis started asking simple questions. How long we'd been married, what Marlon did for work, whether I knew about any recent real estate transactions. My heart raced, but I tried to stay calm. Just as I started to answer, the front door opened. Marlon walked in, holding 2 grocery bags and humming to himself. The moment he saw the agents, he froze. The color drained from his face. One bag slipped from his hand, apples rolling across the floor. "Mr. Devereaux?" Agent Ramirez stood. "You're under arrest for fraud and money laundering." Marlon's voice cracked. "Wait, what?" "There's been some mistake." They read him his rights while he stood there, looking more furious than scared. I couldn't move. My body felt heavy, my breath shallow. This couldn't be real. Not my husband, not the man I thought I knew. Agent Lewis gently asked me to sit down. I did, clutching the edge of the table. As they handcuffed Marlon, he looked at me, not with love or apology, but with something sharp, almost accusing. "Zaria," he said low, "you don't know what you've done." I didn't even answer. I just watched as they walked him out the door. Before leaving, Agent Lewis turned back to me. His voice softened. "Mrs. Devereaux, your cabin sale. It's part of an ongoing investigation into a real estate scam ring. We believe your husband's been involved for quite some time." I sat there long after they left, staring at the half-empty dinner plates and the apples rolling near the doorway. The house felt colder, quieter. My marriage, my trust, my dream. Everything I'd built was collapsing right in front of me, and I couldn't stop it. The house felt different without Marlon in it. Too quiet, too hollow. His scent still lingered in the hall, that mix of cologne and aftershave he always wore. But now it made my skin crawl. I walked into his office with shaking hands, unsure what I was looking for. Maybe answers, maybe the truth I'd been too scared to face. The blinds were half closed, casting stripes of light across his desk. Everything was neat, too neat. Marlon was never tidy. That alone made me suspicious. I started with the drawers. The first few held the usual things, pens, old receipts, business cards, but the bottom one stuck a little when I tried to pull it out. I tugged harder and found a thin false panel inside. Behind it was a black folder, thick and heavy. When I opened it, my breath caught. Inside were documents, dozens of them, fake property deeds, forged signatures, payment records from names I didn't recognize. Each sheet told a story of someone cheated, someone robbed. My heart raced as I flipped through page after page. My cabin sale was listed right there, transaction number 47. It wasn't just a sale. It was a cover-up, a way to wash money through fake property deals. The realization hit me like a slap. He hadn't just lied to me, he'd used me. My name, my trust, my inheritance, all part of his dirty work. I sat down on the floor, the folder open beside me, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Every laugh we'd shared, every "I love you," felt like a performance now. I wanted to scream, but instead I kept digging. There was a locked box under his desk. I found the key taped under the keyboard, typical of his arrogance. Inside were stacks of envelopes. Most were filled with more paperwork, but one stack was different, handwritten letters tied together with a ribbon. They were from someone named Ria Linder. The first line made my stomach twist. "I can't wait until we're free, Marlon. Belize is waiting." I read one after another, each one worse than the last. She wrote about how close they were to finishing their final job, how she couldn't wait to disappear with him once he had the money washed clean. The dates on the letters went back months, long before my cabin was ever sold. The betrayal burned deep. He hadn't just been cheating me financially. He'd been planning to run away with her, start over somewhere tropical with stolen money and a new name. I sat there for hours, surrounded by his lies, my tears falling onto the papers. When the sobs finally stopped, something inside me hardened. He had taken everything from me, my trust, my home, my peace, but he hadn't taken my strength. I gathered every file, every letter, every receipt, and packed them neatly into a box. I whispered to myself, "You thought you destroyed me, Marlon. But this time, I'll be the one to finish the job." That night, I locked the box in my closet and made a promise. I would rebuild my life from these ashes, and I would make sure Marlon paid for every lie he ever told. Kiona and I sat in her tiny kitchen with the laptop between us, the kind of quiet that meant both of us were holding our breath. She tapped keys fast, eyes sliding over numbers and names. Every time a new line popped up, my stomach dropped. "There," she said, finally pointing. "That transfer went to a company called Marlowe Investments. That's a shell." I watched the trail unfold on the screen like a map of lies. The 70,000 didn't stop at Marlowe. It moved through 2 other companies, like it was being passed along so nobody could find where it began. Kiona scrolled more, and the next hit made her frown. "Look at this, Z. It lands in an account registered in your name, but it's offshore, Cayman registers. Who set that up for you?" My throat closed. My name, on a foreign account, receiving money from a sale I never approved. For a moment I thought I might be sick. Kiona leaned back. "They're trying to make you the owner on paper. If this looks real on the books, it ties you to the transfers." We both knew what that meant. If the FBI followed the paperwork, it would point straight to me. I felt smaller than I had in years, like someone had slipped me into a suit that didn't fit and expected me to play a role I never auditioned for. Kiona didn't waste time. She called a contact at her office who handled more complex title issues. He confirmed what she suspected: shell companies, layered transfers, an offshore account that could only be opened through a front. "They're professionals," he said. "This isn't some backyard scheme." The next day, an agent from the earlier arrest called and asked me to come in. I showed up with Kiona at my side and a folder of everything I'd found: copies of deeds, receipts, photographs of the forged signature. The interview room smelled like cold coffee and fluorescent lights. A tall man with tired eyes introduced himself as Agent Tobias Vance. He didn't shout or flash a badge. He spoke quiet and steady, like someone used to steadying others. "We believe your husband's been moving properties to launder money," he said. "The transfers point to an offshore account that, strangely, lists you as the beneficiary." His voice made the world tilt. "We need your cooperation to clear your name." He explained protection programs and witness cooperation, the legal language softening the blow. He said they'd keep me safe if I helped them build the case. I felt like a puppet pulled toward a stage I didn't choose. I handed over the folder. Every paper Kiona and I had pulled together, because I needed the FBI to see the same proof I did. But I didn't hand over everything. There was one small drive tucked inside my purse, encrypted and labeled with a code only Marlon and I would have known. I'd found it hidden in his office and copied its contents before bringing him to justice. I let the agents take my files, watch their faces as they read, and agree to open investigations. I watched their relief when the forensics matched my claims. When they left, Kiona and I sat in the car for a long time, silent. I clutched the drive under my jacket like a lit ember. Dangerous, but mine. I had given them the truth I wanted them to see. I had kept one secret for myself. That night, after the agents left and the house was quiet again, I sat alone at Marlon's old desk with the encrypted drive in front of me. The tiny silver thing looked harmless, but I knew it held the rest of the truth, the part one hadn't shown the FBI. I plugged it into the laptop, my heart thudding in my chest. The screen asked for a password. For a moment I stared at it, unsure, then something came to me, the word Belize. He'd mentioned that place too many times in those letters. I typed Belize 2022 and hit enter. The files opened instantly. Dozens of folders appeared, each with strange names and dates. My hands shook as I clicked through them. There were contracts, Fake ones, just like the ones I'd seen before, but these were bigger, cleaner, written like someone who'd done this for years. I scrolled through wire transfer receipts showing hundreds of thousands of dollars moving from account to account. And then I found the list. It wasn't just names, it was people. Addresses, property descriptions, bank information. Every name on that list had something taken from them. My eyes caught on one, Odessa Pike 78, family farm seized, property sold at undervalue. I covered my mouth with my hand. She was one of the victims. My cabin wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern. I sat there reading until my vision blurred. Marlon hadn't just lied to me. He'd built a life off the pain of others. These weren't random deals, they were targeted. People who were old, grieving, desperate. He found them, promised help, and stole everything they owned. Anger rose inside me, sharp and cold. I had spent years believing in him, defending him, building a future that was nothing but his cover story. I wiped my tears away and opened a new browser tab. If the FBI was building a case, they didn't know half of it. But I did. I started searching for Odessa Pike. It didn't take long. Her name came up in a local news story about a widow who lost her farm after her husband passed. The reporter mentioned she now lived in a small apartment near Charlotte. I wrote down the address. The next morning, I drove out to find her. She was sitting on her porch, a tiny woman with silver hair and tired eyes. When I introduced myself, she looked wary until I said Marlon's name. Her whole face hardened. He said he was going to help me, she whispered. Said he was a real estate investor who helped widows. Took my deed, said it was temporary. I never saw him again. Hearing her story broke something in me, but it also focused me. I promised her quietly, I'm going to make sure everyone he hurt gets justice. That night, back home, I looked at the list again. Each name was a ghost Marlon had created. And I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was the woman who was going to bring his whole empire down, piece by piece, until every lie he told burned in the light. I stayed up late that night, the house quiet except for the hum of Marlon's old laptop. It felt wrong using his things, but that laptop was a key now. I opened it, created a new anonymous email, and started typing. I didn't put my name. I didn't need to. I only wrote what I knew, property addresses, transaction dates, the shell company names, and snippets from the encrypted drive. I sent the first tip to an FBI inbox I'd found in a public notice about property fraud. Then I sent another to a local elder advocacy group, and one to a reporter who had covered a similar case. The messages were careful. No emotion, just facts. I wanted them to take the papers seriously, not blame me for being a bitter wife. I used Marlon's laptop to route the messages through different accounts so they couldn't trace them back to me. It felt like a small, secret war. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I had a plan. While the emails were sent, I wrote a letter to Marlon in prison. I folded the paper slowly, choosing words that sounded forgiving. I miss the man I thought I married, I wrote. I forgive you if you can be honest with me. The letter was ice. Beneath the soft words I hid questions that only he would answer. Names, places, proof of who handled the offshore transfers. I wanted him to drop his guard. I sealed the envelope and mailed it through the prison's allowed contact system, waiting to see if his arrogance would make him talk. 2 weeks passed with nothing. Then a reply came. His handwriting was the same, bold and sure. He wrote soft lies at first, but he couldn't keep the mask on. You always thought too much, he wrote. You never understood the work. But fine, there's a man named Clyde who keeps the files. He's sloppy but loyal. If you're asking, he still has ledgers and a box of deeds. Don't go looking for him, he's smart. I read the letter 3 times. Clyde. That was a name I hadn't seen on any document. It was small, careless, and exactly the kind of mistake Marlon made when he forgot who might read his words. I typed the name into the anonymous email and sent it straight to Agent Vance with a note. Clyde. Check his address book, check his storage. The next day, Agent Tobias Vance called me. I stayed calm, letting him lead the conversation. He said they'd followed a lead and found storage units linked to a Clyde Harrow. Inside were boxes of documents, old deed copies, and a notebook with transaction notes. 2 men were in custody within 48 hours, Clyde and another associate listed in the notebook. When the press released the names, I watched from the kitchen window as investigators carried evidence out of a storage facility. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I sat quietly with a cup of tea while my chest burned with a slow, hot anger that felt like steel. The work I did from behind a screen and behind a polite letter had moved the case forward. People called me brave later. Friends said I was strong. But I knew the truth. I was steady because I had to be. My calm was a mask, a tool I used to turn grief into action. Each arrest was a small justice, one that started with a hard truth and a decision not to be silent. The courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The day had come, Marlon's trial. Months of investigation, interviews, and quiet waiting had all led to this moment. I sat at the front of the courtroom, my name printed on a witness list that still didn't feel real. When they called me to the stand, my knees almost gave out, but I stood tall. The prosecutor's voice was steady as she guided me through the questions. "Mrs. Devereaux," she said softly, "can you tell the court what happened after you learned the cabin was sold?" My voice wavered at first, but I forced myself to look up. I described how I found out, how Marlon lied, how the FBI came to the door that night. I spoke about the forged signature, the fake companies, the offshore account. Every sentence pulled a thread from my heart, but I didn't stop. The courtroom was silent except for my voice and the sound of pens scratching on paper. When the defense took over, the air changed. Marlon's lawyer, a sharp-faced man with a slick voice, smiled like he knew something I didn't. "Mrs. Devereaux," he began, "you were married to my client for how long?" 5 years, I said. "And in those 5 years, you claim you had no knowledge of his business activities?" "That's correct." He tilted his head. "So, the money that appeared in your name, the account in the Caymans, that didn't raise any questions." I stayed calm. "I didn't know about it until the FBI told me." He smirked. "It's convenient, isn't it? Your name on the account, your signature on the deed, and yet you're the victim. Sounds almost rehearsed." My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. I just said, "It's not rehearsed. It's the truth." A murmur spread through the room. Marlon sat at the defense table, watching me with that same smirk he used to wear when he thought he was untouchable. But this time, I didn't look away. Then the prosecutor stood again. "Your Honor, the state would like to submit new evidence, recordings recovered from the defendant's burner phone." The judge nodded. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the audio played. Marlon's voice filled the room, casual and cruel. "Use her name," he said in the recording. "Zaria's clean. No one will question a nurse." Gasps rippled through the audience. I felt my throat close, but I stayed still, staring straight ahead. Marlon's face drained of color. The smirk vanished. For the first time, he looked afraid. The prosecutor let the silence hang before she said, "That recording was taken less than a week before the cabin's sale." When it was time for the verdict, the jury filed back in. I gripped the edge of my seat as the foreman stood. "We find the defendant, Marlon Devereaux, guilty on all counts." Marlon didn't look at me. He just lowered his head as the guards moved in. I sat there quietly, tears slipping down my face, not from sadness, but from the weight of justice finally landing where it belonged. The wind was gentle that morning, brushing through the empty space where my grandmother's cabin once stood. All that remained was a patch of wild grass and a few stubborn nails glinting in the dirt. I stood there with a mason jar in my hands, filled with the soil I'd saved from the original garden. It wasn't much, just earth and memory, but it was all I had left of that place. I knelt down slowly, my knees pressing into the soft ground. "You're home again, Grandma," I whispered as I unscrewed the lid and poured the soil beneath the young maple tree we'd just planted. The dirt fell in small, uneven clumps, carried off by the breeze like it knew exactly where to go. Kiona stood a few steps behind me, her arm around Odessa, the elderly widow whose farm Marlon had taken. Both women were quiet, letting me have the moment. When I finally stood, Kiona came forward with a small plaque she'd made. It read, "For the ones who lost and those who rose again." We placed it at the base of the tree. The government had seized the land as part of Marlon's case. It was technically property of the investigation now, but Agent Vance had gotten me special permission to visit. He'd even helped arrange the tree planting, though he insisted on keeping it low-key. "You deserve peace, not headlines," he'd said earlier. I saw him now, standing by his car, hands in his pockets. He gave a small nod when our eyes met, the kind of gesture that said everything without words. I walked over to him. "Thank you," I said softly. He shrugged. "You did the hard part. We just followed the trail you lit." "I just wanted it to stop," I admitted. "And it did," he replied, "because you stood up when you could have stayed silent." His words lingered as he turned to leave. Watching the car disappear down the narrow dirt road, I felt something shift inside me. Not closure exactly, but calm. A few weeks later, Kiona and I filed the paperwork for the Colston Foundation, named after my grandmother. Odessa joined as our first board member. The mission was simple: help victims of property fraud rebuild their lives. We started small: one phone, one laptop, one rented office above a diner. But it felt right. Every letter we sent, every story we heard reminded me that what was taken from me had grown into something new. One evening, after everyone had gone home, I drove back to the tree. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft gold and pink. I sat in the grass, leaning against the young maple, and finally allowed the tears to come. Not for the cabin, not even for Marlin, but for everything I'd survived: the lies, the fear, the heartbreak. Each tear that fell felt lighter, like dust being carried away by the wind. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't mourning. I was free. The envelope arrived on a gray afternoon, thin and smudged, with my name written in the handwriting I used to love. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. The return address said it all: the Federal Correctional Facility where Marlon Devereaux now lived. I held it for a long time, tracing the uneven letters with my thumb. Somewhere inside, I knew what it would say. The same empty words: apologies dressed up as regret, sentences built to tug at the soft parts of me he used to know so well. But those parts of me were gone now. I walked out to the backyard, to the edge of my new porch, the one I built myself with help from a few kind neighbors. The board still smelled like pine and sunlight. I struck a match and held the corner of the envelope to the flame. It caught quickly, curling and darkening until it folded in on itself, nothing but ash falling into the small metal dish I kept for burning old papers. The wind carried the last bits away, scattering them over the soil where I'd planted new flowers. "You don't get to live here anymore," I whispered, more to myself than to him. That night, the world felt quiet in a way I hadn't known before. The crickets hummed softly in the trees, and the smell of rain lingered in the air. I sat on the steps of the porch, a mug of tea warming my hands, watching the last of the sunlight fade behind the hills. The sky melted from gold to blue, and for once, I didn't think about what I'd lost. I thought about what I'd built. Inside, my new home felt small but safe. The walls were painted the color of calm, soft cream and pale green. There were no secrets here, no hidden phones or files, no lies waiting to be found. Just peace. Real, earned peace. I took out my journal, the one I'd started after everything ended. It was almost full now, page after page of rebuilding, not just homes, but myself. On the last clean sheet, I wrote, "He sold my dream for $70,000. I built a new one worth peace." The words came easily this time, no tears, no hesitation. I closed the book and placed it on the porch railing, letting the evening breeze flip through its pages like a quiet song. From the shed nearby came a soft rhythm, the steady, comforting sound of hammering. My next project had already begun. A small bench for the front yard, something simple and sturdy, something made entirely by my own hands. As the stars appeared one by one above the trees, I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. The past was gone, burned and buried. The future was being built, nail by nail, heartbeat by heartbeat. And this time it was mine alone. Do you think Zaria made the right choice by burning that letter and moving on? Or would you have opened it to see what he had to say? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this speak to you, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.